thinking about the idea of selflessness, we think always good. If it's selflessness, but it's leading to burnout, is it good? So if I am selfish, I set aside time for me. I do not give that out to anyone else. That is actually a very good thing because then I show up differently.
Right.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Leader Lab. This is Leadership Shorts, quick thoughts to help you level up your leadership. My name is Chad Wright. I'm the founder of Forward Partners, and I'm joined by my partner in podcasting, Emily Grace Deal. Emily, what are we talking about today?
There is often talk of being a selfless leader or
We
a
hear
servant
that all
leader.
the time. A servant leader, selfless leader, yes.
Are there times when it's okay or better to be a selfish leader?
To go the opposite direction, right?
Yes.
You know the Simon Sinek book, Leaders Eat Last? We're going to write Leaders Eat First. So are there those times? And I think there are because, again, the selflessness has to come from something. We're not naturally selfless, right? We don't have this infinite well of just good for others.
Yes.
It's got to come from somewhere. And so can we short-term be selfless and in no way refill that, in no way be selfish enough to invest in ourselves? Absolutely. Short-term we can, long-term, no. Eventually it runs out, right?
Yes.
And so I think there are times to think about it and think about it's okay to be selfish in some ways, right? It's okay to invest in me. Part of where this idea came from, I was talking to a gentleman one day, and he's been in leadership for many, many, many years. And we were talking about the guilt that he feels when he takes time off.
Yeah.
There is kind of this inbuilt guilt of, I'm not working, therefore I'm not doing something good.
Well, I think that's being selfish at all, right? We're kind of taught like that's the bad. Like, do not be selfish. What are you doing? You are a terrible person if you do that. And I think we have to look at it as it's not all bad one way or another.
Yes.
It's how much you're doing of either way, right? If you're completely selfless and have nothing for yourself, well, that's not going to last long.
No.
And if you're really selfish and have nothing for others, well, that's not going to go well for you either.
And it's kind of that middle ground we're always talking about, right? We start with focus on us. When we talk about defeating burnout, we talked about certain rhythms, and one of them was a rhythm of creation. If we start each day investing in us, if we start each week resting and investing in us, then we're genuinely ready to go be selfless. Right. And when you've got organizations where they'll point to a leader and go, well, that guy is all about himself, that woman is all about herself, they're very selfish, they're not a great leader. Usually what you're going to find is a person who does not invest in themselves. Therefore, they don't have good things to give, right?
Right. Well, and it can become like, I stayed late and I did this and I did that. And this person over here is leaving at 5.
Yeah.
It's hard to see that all the time. It's like, well, also good for them.
Yes.
And you just have to choose when you need to do, what's important and when you need to make those decisions. And it's not always staying late. That's not always the answer.
And to communicate it. So when I, as a leader, am going to choose to be selfish, we talk all the time about modeling things for our people. If I'm going to be what we call selfish and invest in me, I'm going to take time to genuinely invest in me and rest and exercise and be ready for all the things to deal with. We have to talk about that.
Right.
Am I, as a leader, leaving at 3 o'clock? Absolutely. Did I start working this morning at 6 o'clock? Probably.
Right.
Like that is the thing that we can communicate that, because there are certain actions, and this is what I think is interesting. There are certain actions that can look really selfish, and there are certain actions that can look selfless, but they may not be.
Well, and like if you are labeling it for yourself and for me and telling me what it is and what's happening, then it's easier for me to be, I'm not labeling it for you behind your back going, oh my gosh, what a selfish jerk
Look at that
Chad's
selfish
being.
person, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So it's easier for me to then be like, no, Chad has realized he needs this time.
Yes.
He's realized that this is, whatever decision, whether it be a big amount of time or an extra day or leaving at 3, whatever it is, if you've identified it and communicated that to me, then I'm also like, okay, this makes sense. And I feel more inclined to do that too and know that I could sit and tough out another 2 hours of today, but today I have, and be able to know that that's okay and communicate that to you.
And I think with that, I love the communication piece, making sure we're all clear on what's happening and why it's happening, right? It's easy to look at something as selfish and therefore bad or selfless and therefore good. The reality is it's neither one of those things. It is, why am I being intentional? Why am I doing the thing I'm doing? So if I'm leaving early every day, but I'm also then putting in extra hours somewhere else, it's good for people to know that. If I'm coming in a little late, but that first hour is spent investing in me, totally worth it, right?
Right.
And so I think part of this is communicating, but also removing the stigma that either one of those things is either good or bad.
Yeah.
Right. It's in thinking about the idea of selflessness, we think always good. If it's selflessness, but it's leading to burnout, is it good?
And then there's like a lot of motivation things in there too that I always have to remind myself of.
Yes.
Like, oh, I'm being so selfless right now. Okay.
That's kind of like saying I'm the most humble person in the room. Okay, are you? Yes. Like, I think that is something to think about, is sometimes even the outcomes of how we're doing it. So if I am selfish, I set aside time for me. I do not give that out to anyone else. That is actually a very good thing, because then I show up differently.
Right.
And if I'm selfless and I give so much of myself that I break, we talked about breaking points the last few episodes. If I hit a breaking point because I am unlimited in my selflessness,
that's not helping anybody.
That's not good. And so I think part of this is really looking the motivation underneath, and what am I trying to get to?
Right.
And I love that you brought up communication, really over communicating that. So ultimately, leaders, I think we think about selflessness as always good. And we think about selfishness as always bad. If we can genuinely be intentional about it, to where if we are going to take time for us to invest in us, that is selfish at a base level, but it is so that we can then be selfless in a healthy way, in a good way. All of this is what creates sustainability. If we are selfish first and then we're selfless for others, we can do that sustainably. If all we do is just give, it's coming from a well of nothing, and ultimately it's not good. It's not helpful. And so this is part of how we achieve the sustainability that we talk about all the time. It's having that sharp inward focus, being willing to be a little selfish in the things that matter, and then being willing to be selfish or selfless sustainably in the things that matter for others. We just have to be intentional about every step of that. Selfish, selfless. That's a lot, but I love looking at both sides of that. That's great. If people want to email us questions, thoughts, challenges they're in the middle of that we can speak into, where do they email that?
To lab@forwardpartners.net.
Lab@forwardpartners.net. And if they want to find us online and find all the content that we are creating and giving away for free, where do they find that?
@forwardpartner.
@forwardpartner. Thank you so much for this conversation. John, thank you for producing. Wilco Workspaces, thank you for the partnership on this podcast. We will see you next time right here in the Leader Lab for Leadership Shorts.